Hello, welcome to the annual Community Art Show information line. How can I help you today?
Hi, I've already purchased my ticket for the art show, but I wanted to check a few details before the event. Can you help me with that?
Certainly, I'll just need a few details. Can you provide your postcode to find your booking?
Sure, it's AF741T.
Thank you. Yes, I've found your booking. Just to confirm, you've booked for the 25th of November, right?
Yes, that's correct. What time does the event begin?
The doors open at 4 p.m., but the actual event starts at 4:30 p.m. However, we advise arriving early to avoid any delays. By the way, did you know there's a discount for local residents?
Yes, I think I already received it. I'm pretty sure I paid £16.50, right?
Let me check. Yes, you're right. You paid £16.50 instead of the standard £20.
I'm glad I qualified for the discount. Will my family members be able to come for free, as I heard?
That's correct. Family members of local residents can enter free of charge. Just make sure you bring some form of ID that shows your residency.
Excellent. Do you know how many artworks will be on display this year?
Oh, there will be more than 360 pieces from both local and international artists. Last year, we had 320 pieces, but we've expanded the exhibition.
That's impressive. And will there be any special performances this time?
Yes, there's a live sound show that's generating a lot of excitement. It's actually the first time we're including this type of performance.
Oh, a sound performance. I love unique events like that. Now, I also heard there will be live music, right? I believe I read it's going to be guitar music.
Actually, there was an initial plan for guitar music, but it's been changed. Instead, we'll have live piano music, which we think will create a better atmosphere for the event.
That sounds lovely. Now, I'm curious about refreshments. Will there be any available?
Yes, drinks will be sold at the venue, and each ticket holder gets a free drink, either alcoholic or non-alcoholic depending on your preference. We'll have a selection of beverages available including water, juices and wine.
Nice. I'll probably stick to non-alcoholic. I'm bringing my kids along. Are there any special activities for them?
Certainly. We're offering art workshops for children under 12, but please note that parents or guardians must accompany them at all times during the event.
Understood. I'll make sure to keep an eye on them. One last thing. What happens if the event is cancelled? Will we get our money back?
Unfortunately, the tickets are non-refundable, but don't worry. We've taken out an insurance policy for the event. In the event of cancellation, the insurance will cover the cost of your tickets, so you're safe there.
That's good to know. Thanks for all the information.
You're welcome. We
You will
look
hear
forward
a
to seeing
woman
you.
introducing a new fitness center to the local residents. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone. We are gathered today for the unveiling of our new fitness centre. Our business started in 2006 when we recognised the need for a new, modern and affordable fitness centre for those living in the area. We pulled resources together and started a small centre just off this road to your left. We have been there over the years until we decided we needed more room and more facilities due to the increasing numbers. This new facility is estimated to contain at least 1,000 people at a time and is equipped with the latest state-of-the-art fitness facilities you can think of. From the entrance, just to your right, you would get to the meeting room where we hold team meetings sometimes. In the past, our customers usually came in through the west gate and went to the first room on their left to exercise. Well, this room used to be the gym room, but now it's the women's fitting room. Our female customers can change and try on clothes there. The gym room would be the big room on your right as you enter from the west gate. It houses state-of-the-art gym equipment, as well as provides an arena for working out. At the top right corner of the map, we have the men's fitting room where men can change with some privacy. Some squash members say they would like to have classes at the room between two fitting rooms, as it would be more convenient to change after sweating. Well, we will have a discussion about it and inform you if any changes happen. Now our squash court is still at the other wing, situated directly opposite the west gate. The larger building behind it is the largest in the state for skating courses. It provides adequate conditioning and the properly selected tracks for beginners.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Why invest a lot in fitness and sports? Well, we have observed that in our society, the rate at which people develop preventable diseases is alarming. Statistics show that there is a very strong link between sedentary lifestyle and these diseases. We have set up this centre to correct and combat it while making sure it is open, accessible and affordable to all. To develop overall strength in the individual, the fitness machines are built to help those who always complain of muscle weakness, to overcome their challenges. We also have rooms for mat exercises. Many people always think that such exercises are only good for limbs and shoulders. Well, actually, for anyone who wants to have a flexible body, these exercises such as plank and crunches are a good choice. You don't need any high-end fitness equipment. We also have an expanse of space just behind the building that we use for cycling exercises. This sport is good to help develop strength in the legs, and it is equally a good way of freeing the mind. Many members hope that such exercises will help them lose weight. I'm afraid they don't work that way. We offer aerobics for those interested in raising their heart rate. It is a great sport to train your mind and also makes blood flow more efficient and faster. Contrary to what most people think, weight training does little to help you lose weight, but it does help you develop solid mental coordination and to stay focused without getting distracted so easily. So, as we unveil this centre today, we're glad that you can also be a part of this step in the right direction. Thank you all for honouring us.
That's the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. You will hear 2 music students discussing the results of a survey they have done. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
So, Gareth, we need to organise the findings from our survey on music students for the final presentation.
Yes, Lorna. I think we've got some very interesting results. Obviously, we need to start by saying that we interviewed all the third-year students doing a music degree and state the objective of our research project, that is, to find out about their attitudes to performing.
And then we should talk about the students' musical backgrounds before coming to university. The most important points to make are that although most people have actually composed music during the course, that wasn't the case when they arrived. And the other thing they had in common was the piano.
Well, they'd had access to a piano at some point, but not all had studied it formally. I thought the most interesting finding was that before coming here, almost everyone was involved in a chamber orchestra or band, or singing in a choir and playing in front of live audiences.
But varying enormously in size. Some had only played in tiny venues. I think it's worth saying that.
OK. And as you might expect from people wanting to study music, they all had a degree of proficiency in at least 2 instruments, but in most cases, one of the instruments was dominant.
Right. We need to talk about attitudes to music practice. The most striking thing here is that even students who you'd expect to practice for hours every day until they get it perfect say it's being terrified of failing that really makes them practice. I know I'm the same.
Me too. It's interesting what was said about practicing alone. Some people preferred that because they could focus more on their weak points.
But that wasn't a majority view. What most of them agree on is that there's nothing more rewarding than mastering something that's really hard to learn.
That's right. Okay, after that, we should talk a bit about the pieces that students select for assessed performances.
There wasn't quite so much consensus on this, was there? A few people prefer to do pieces which are relatively unknown, while others choose the ones they think will show off their technical ability. But they were in the minority.
I think the first thing to say is that a high percentage said they would always try to learn their pieces by heart because it's too easy to get lost if you're trying to read and play when you're nervous.
Okay. And quite a lot of them said it helps to listen to other people playing your chosen piece, preferably recordings, but even just other students.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So finally, we need to look at the findings for students' attitudes to performing. We should point out that this includes informal and formal public performances as well as assessed ones.
Yes, that's important. I expected to find that performing solo would make students very nervous, but in fact that isn't the case.
They do find it hugely challenging to start with, but they appreciate the challenge and find it stimulating.
Right. I was surprised by what students said about deciding which pieces to perform. I thought they'd all say this was easy. For me, it's always been quite straightforward. Which pieces do I like best? And which pieces can I play well? And my repertoire is quite limited anyway. But the most commonly cited answer was that it took them ages to make their minds up.
I suppose it's because there are so many factors involved. You need to consider your audience, the venue, the time available to learn the piece, especially if it's complicated. You need to think about all these things, and you can't do that in a hurry.
That's true.
Then there's performing with musicians from a different genre, like a classical musician playing with a jazz group. That can really be fun.
But most of the music students had never even considered it.
Right. For performing with musicians who play the same instrument, almost everyone put the same thing.
Yes, they all said it was incredibly helpful, and not at all intimidating, which says a lot for the department's ethos.
Yes, that's a good point. Okay, what I think we should sort out now.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Part 4. You will hear a lecture about some archaeological research. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So far in these lectures, we've been looking at evidence of human migration across the African continent and into mainland Asia. Today, let's see what evidence we have for Stone Age man, specifically in Japan. The particular evidence, as you will see, has had a considerable impact on the beliefs of both archaeologists and anthropologists. Let's start by mentioning the man who first discovered this evidence. In 1877, an American zoologist, Edward S. Morse, went looking for shells and fossils in Japan at Omori, an area which had once been coastal. But he also ended up discovering fragments of pottery. On the fragments, there was a pattern that was unlike anything archaeologists had seen before. At the time, it was thought that this pottery was no more than a few thousand years old. Then, in the 1960s, archaeologists were carrying out excavations in Fukui Cave in the Japanese island of Kyushu, and they found more examples of this pottery. They could now take advantage of carbon dating technology, and to their amazement, it showed that the pottery had been made around 12,000 years ago. That's 10,000 BC. This pottery has become known as Jomon pottery, and the period of time during which it was produced has been named the Jomon period. How did the people who made this pottery find their way to Japan in the first place? During the Ice Age, somewhere between 35,000 BC and 30,000 BC, the Japanese islands, as we know them today, were connected to the eastern and southeastern Asian mainland. So you could cross from one large landmass to another over something that we call a land bridge, and that's how Stone Age humans crossed into Japan. But when temperatures finally rose, this led to some major environmental changes. Japan had been covered in frozen earth, but now, with the warmer climate, forests grew. With this new habitat, smaller animals began to appear, such as sika deer, still found in Japan today, as well as wild boar and bear. Where once people had used spears to attack the elephants and giant deer that they depended upon for food, for hunting the new smaller animals, they replaced these weapons with arrows and developed skills in archery. The new habitat also meant that they had a new range of foodstuffs at their disposal, which they could collect, a greater variety of plants, nuts, and fish. Now, this way of life continued for thousands of years. But then we come to the early Jomon period, which was from about 10,500 BC to 8,000 BC. Well, according to previous archaeological theory, the people in these very early societies didn't make or use pottery because they were hunters who were constantly on the move, following the animals, and they wouldn't have been able to carry it around with them. But it now appears that the early Jomon people actually seem to have invented pottery making while they were still getting their food in this way, long before they had begun to rely on agriculture as a source of food. Later, in the Jomon period 8,000 BC to 5,000 BC, we find larger pots that were used to boil vegetable-type food to make it edible, which suggests that the Jomon people had become at least semi-sedentary. In other words, were remaining in the same place for a while. For a long time, they had lived in caves, but now we find evidence of villages. One of these has been found to the southwest of Mount Fuji. There is evidence of 10 round buildings. The Jomon dug shallow pits in the ground and used wooden posts to hold up the roof. Each of these houses had its own 2 stones, a flat one and a grinding one for breaking down the nuts and other hard vegetable-type foodstuffs the Jomon survived on at this time. This more sedentary culture led to important population increases. By the end of the Jomon period, we see the influence of migration from northern Asia and the southern Pacific. For example, the newcomers brought with them technological developments in textiles and glassmaking, and they also introduced their marriage rituals. We also have evidence that the migrants influenced local architectural styles and methods of construction. At this time, the Jomon people also began to cultivate food, and in particular, rice. At last, a real step towards the practice of agriculture. It is remarkable that this unique culture survived for so long without it.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.
That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.